Hello, hello, welcome, please come in. It's time to resume our makeup work today in Final Fantasy XII. And this time we will be beating the game using only magic. FF12 was not included in the original magic-only series, mostly because FF12 already gets a lot of airtime on the channel, and realistically most Final Fantasy games could have been in that list, so I wanted to choose games with interesting magic systems that get a little less screen time. But FF12 was first on the list to be included in the makeup work section, because this game's whole combat system is very different, and that creates some problems. One note, as we have gained control of Phon, I will actually need to use basic attacks for just a little bit. I can make Phon a black mage to deal damage. Could be argued healing magic would be nice, and that is true, but white mages get no damaging spells, red mages don't get cure, and I need a class to learn fire so I can start dealing damage. I do need to actually get the LP to learn that first license though, so while I do that, let's define what I mean by magic only. In combat, I can only select magic commands. I can also only assign gambits with magic. I will also not be using the Berserk spell. That would work, technically, by the rules of the challenge, but kind of feels like cheating, especially with how powerful that strategy can be. I also just can't use items. In other videos in the series, I allowed myself to use items outside of combat. However, FF12 doesn't really have an outside of combat, other than maybe the towns where you just run around as Phon, but at that point you can interact with a save crystal to fully heal. Does this make this challenge a bit more difficult than other games because no items? Maybe. On the other hand, you passively regain MP through running around and via some licenses, so maybe that will be enough. Anyway, I have fire, the first hunt is done, and it's south into the Giza Plains to recruit Penelo and buy the cure spell. This portion of the game is kind of a bit annoying. I can't customize gambits yet, so I need to just turn them off. And I think I'm actually just going to make Penelo a white mage to heal. That way I can leave the damage dealing to Phon. Not the most efficient since Penelo has a higher magic stat, but Penelo is only in the party for a short time before she leaves anyway. Anywho, fire is more than enough to just run around beating up monsters and make a sunstone. This will unlock the big party. Before that though, I should buy the dark spell that is now available. That should be very useful. Time to run through Garam's Scythe. I actually need to be pretty careful here. Phon's spell damage is quite good, but I literally can't heal yet. It's not a long section, but I think I'm just gonna run for it. And into the party, and the party is over, and that means 2 new party members, Balthier and Fran, and I can finally customize gambits. Fran gets to be a red mage. This will give some good spell variety, including dark, and Fran knows cure by default, so that's totally fine. Given Fran should be primary healer, we'll make Balthier black mage to get some additional damage. Can you see where I've made a critical miscalculation? Don't worry, we'll get there. Anyway, gambit's set up, combat is less annoying, but we are starting to run into the big limiter of the magic-only run, MP. Seriously, the biggest issue, at least for now, is just that MP is so limited in the early game. MP does regenerate as you run around, but it regenerates very slowly. There are licenses that restore MP when dealing damage, taking damage, etc., except I don't have any of these yet, and even if I did, the MP they restore scales real weird and it starts off real bad. Just completely worthless trash. The charge technic is not available yet, and even if it were, technics are not spells. And Siphon is a spell, but is locked behind, frankly, way too many hunts. Okay, let's try out the next boss. Oh, my critical miscalculation. Firemane is a horse made of fire. You may then be able to guess that fire, the spell, is not especially effective here. But that's okay, I have dark, and it deals pretty good damage. Good thing Fran isn't also my only healer. Oh, and I've disabled Amalia's gambits for good measure because Amalia doesn't know magic. So frankly, there are several ways I screwed up here. I could have made Balthier a white mage to serve as primary healer, so Fran could prioritize dark casts. I could have made both of them red mages to have 2 casters of dark. I could have gone out of my way in the Esther Sand to just buy Blizzard so I'd actually have a spell to cast. Any or all of these could have been effective ways to not screw up right at the gate. And that's not what I did. Watching back the way too much footage, it would probably have been faster to reset the run than do what I'm doing now, which is to say grinding up experience for the first boss. Considerable grinding later, and we are back into the fight. The good news is Amalia does actually have access to cure, so she can serve as the only healer. She doesn't have a ton of MP, and this fight is going to last long enough that that will be a problem, but by running around constantly, I can get that slow MP regeneration to work for me. It takes a while, way more casts of dark than it should have, but finally, Firemane goes down, and it only took an hour and a half to beat the first boss of the game. For context, I'm usually back in Rabanastre after the Barheim segment in about an hour, including the intro section I normally skip, so this is going great. Anyway, in Barheim, I can buy the whole party new armor, new weapons, and some new spells of kinda dubious value. And now it's into Barheim Passage. Guest Bosch has joined, but he doesn't have any spells, so he's just here to hang out. And I do have a new spell that I will not really be using because mimics absorb lightning damage. So, yay, this is going great, I guess. Barheim isn't too difficult, but it continues to highlight the MP issue that is going to be a running theme throughout this entire playthrough. And let's hope it doesn't prove to be too much of a problem in our next boss fight, the Mimic Queen. This boss summons adds during the fight, which is not ideal, and the fire is just not strong enough to take them out in one cast. Good news is my damage is quite good, and while the Mimic Queen does have some dangerous attacks, I can... Oh, that's embarrassing. Dying to Mimic Queen? That's new, I think. Anyway, let's switch Fran over to use Dark. I was sticking to fire to save MP, but I think the better damage and being able to hit the Queen and spawn should be more useful at this point. Okay, yeah, that's some pretty good damage, and there we go. Thank you, that's what I was hoping for. Anyway, now I can head to the Estersand town, buy Blizzard, like I should have earlier, and then it's back to Rabanastre. Here, Bosch joins the party, and it's time to buy the element targeting gambits. These should be very useful to simplify my setups. And it's over to Bujerba. Lamont joins the party, which is very nice. He doesn't have any offensive magic, but he does have Cura. Oh, he also has Aqua? Huh, never knew that. The magic shop also has Protect and Shell, which is fine, I guess. Shops have new armor and shields, that's nice. Time to set up some new gambits. I will need to get new gambit slots at some point. Into the Lusu Mines, and would you believe that MP is a bit of a problem? Yeah, it still is. I just have no good MP regen. MP will stop being quite so debilitating, eventually, but not until very near the end of the game. Hooray! Good news is there are no required fights here because I can just run from Agamemnon and co. And it's back to Bujerba to do a little shouting puzzle to meet with the Marquis. Oh, and for the pronunciation correction crowd in the comments, both Marquis and Marquis are valid pronunciations depending on context, so I'm going to be going with the pronunciation used in the video game that I am currently playing. Thank you. That done, it's time to board the Leviathan. Here we get Vossler, another guest who is absolutely worthless because he has no spells. And wow, not even to the boss room and I already have no MP, and my party is almost entirely dead. Okay, so this is not going to go super well. The problem is that it's very nearly impossible to get to the boss room with any MP to actually use in said fight, especially with these stupid alarms going off. Let's go ahead and give Bosch the White Mage license board. Bosch's magic stat is pretty low, but having more healing on hand may actually be useful. And then race to the door to the boss room and it's time for a room full of dudes, and wow, this fight is not going well. Not only do I get completely wrecked from a damage perspective, I'm not dealing even close to enough damage to thin out their numbers before I'd run out of MP regardless. Okay, we're back. I've done a little grinding. You may notice Lamont is still in the party. That is because I never saved after completing the Lusu Mines, so when I reloaded outside the Leviathan, Lamont was still here. Which did make leveling easier, but it also means I need to do the Agamemnon section again. At least it's easy enough at 4 times speed. I am sticking with Bosch's White Mage though. Having extra healing is very nice, and while I will eventually drop Bosch in favor of focusing to level my high MP characters, at this point having another character with MP is worth the extra time to level. So, it's back to the Leviathan, rush through to the boss, and get absolutely wrecked at the door. This game really should have had a separate interact button. Okay, we try this again, and we're here! First we switch in Fran, whose Dark Spell should deal quite good damage and hit multiple targets, when she isn't healing to desperately keep everyone alive. I really was not expecting this fight to be a problem, but it sure is. Okay, I'm down to the 2 judges, the real threat here, but wow, that doesn't actually make this that much easier. I have Cure, I have Raise, that's nice, but my MP stocks are very low. I think I'll control Bosch and just run around with him. I need this MP to regen as fast as possible, because he's the only proper healer I have. Balthier does still have most of his MP, but he is also very frail. Alright, we're down to a single judge, and by running around, I can just barely get enough MP to heal Bosch faster than he is getting attacked. Which is not great, but it is working. That slight overage, combined with Bosch's raise access, means while it's really not impressive looking, I can eventually start getting my party healed back up. In retrospect, I probably should have just stopped attacking, because enemies do tend to be more dangerous at low health, but there we go. The boss is done, and Room Full of Dudes may end up being the hardest fight in this entire run. Which is something. But I finally get some good news. Ash has joined the party, and she has a very high magic stat. and a lot of MP to add to my stocks, which is great. More MP, more better. And with Phon being a black mage and Penelo a white mage, I think I'll make Ashe a red mage. This gives her a lot of versatility, which should be very useful. And it is time to escape. I take the short route back because I don't need anything else in this area, and it's time for Penelo to rejoin the party, which means I now have 2 of each color of mage, which should be very useful, and another boss, which should be much easier than Roomful of Dudes. And yeah, Dark makes pretty quick work of the ads, and with all the offensive spells going off, Geese dies very quickly. I may not be able to reflect his arrows back at him, but that's fine. I'm more than strong enough damage-wise. And happy day! The Wester Sand shop sells Cura and Arrow, both very strong in their respective aspects. Especially when a lot of enemies in the next area are weak to wind damage. Vossler rejoins the party as a guest, which is not particularly helpful because he hasn't bothered to learn any spells in the intervening time. And there aren't really any good treasures I care about in the Sandseas other than the Golden Amulet, which to be fair will be useful for LP farming later. Oh, I also need to pick up Reflect. And it's time for another very easy fight against another boss. And this time it's Garuda, who is weak to Dark. So put Fran and Ashe both in the party, and yeah, that was very fast. The extra berries are such a waste of time. Dark is just way too strong in this fight. Okay, time to head into Wraithwall's tomb for another boss fight. The Demon Wall. The first Demon Wall is an obvious no, but the second wall is definitely going to be more doable. Okay, actually yeah, Arrow's dealing really good damage. The Demon Wall can even inflict silence and it just doesn't matter. It just gets absolutely wrecked. Is Roomful of Dudes really going to be the only hard boss fight? That can't be true. Right, anyway, the tomb itself does have a lot of items to pick up, none of which are that good or interesting. And I do have to do a bit of running at points to avoid fights that would drain my MP, but all in all, not too bad. Honestly, just having 6 characters, 2 of which can only heal, does so much to keep my MP stores up. It's still not enough all the time, but it's improving. Good thing it's easy to leave mid-dungeon and touch a save crystal to fully heal. And with my new armor purchased, it's time to fight the boss. Belias is the first Esper, and normally the first difficult fight in a playthrough. Good news, he is weak to water damage, and I have Aqua. The room here is also heavy in mist, so running around restores more MP than normal. Bad news, my party is a bit frail, and can die to Fire Aja. Belias also loves to inflict oil, which makes fire attacks deal even more damage, and I don't have any way to cure it. This fight requires me to switch in and out party members pretty frequently to cover for people dying, but I just barely managed to outlast Belias and win the fight. Okay, that wasn't too bad. Now it's time for a little bit of a spicy fight. Vossler. He loves to cast Reflect on himself, and I don't have Opal Rings to ignore this, so I'm going to need to get creative. First, cast some spells to destroy Vossler's helpers, while Ashe uses Dispel to trap Vossler in a recasting Reflect loop. Then I switch in Bosch, who has been given the Time Mage as his second license grid to cast Reflect on each party member while Ashe continues to trap Vossler in a loop. Phon can then cast Arrow on the party, reflecting 3 arrows at Vossler, killing him very quickly. And wow, does that work. Maybe I should redo my Black Mages Only run. I've learned a lot of silly strategies in this game since my first ever run. Anyway, that is Vossler down, which means I can access the Giza Plains wet, through there to the Osmond Plains and into Jahara. Here I can buy some new spells, and Larsa rejoins the party. Into the Galmor jungle, and it's time to do some money grinding. These panthers are pretty easy to chain together and can drop some pretty valuable loot. Too bad MP is still an issue, so this is less effective than in most runs. Sometimes the loot drops restore MP, that's enough for, like, 2 arrow spells. I really can't wait until my damage numbers are high enough that War Mage and crew restore actual MP amounts. Anyway, looting done, and it's into a root village to get a quest, pick up the very useful haste spell, and it's shopping time, which means new weapons, new armors, new shields, even more useful spells. Really just a great improvement all around. There's even some new accessories to buy. Huzzah! Thundara with a Storm Staff does deal pretty good damage. It is MP expensive though. Oh well, time to borrow Chocobo because I need to reach the Hen Mines. Tier 2 elemental spells really are a big damage upgrade, huh? I mean, MP is still a problem, but at least the damage is actually really good. Also, if you try to cast a spell on an enemy that teleports, you don't expend the MP, which is appreciated. Anyway, it's boss time, and Tiamat presents a similar problem to Vossler. This boss loves to cast Reflect on itself, and I'm going to be attempting to deal with it in the exact same way. Cast Reflect before the fight even starts, and then do a lot of Reflect casting. I even have an extra party member to bounce spells off of. Bad news is that Tiamat is way more durable than Vossler, and while Penelo can mostly keep Tiamat distracted with the spell, it is not 100% reliable. This is probably the most menuing I've ever had to do. And it does get a bit complicated when Reflect wears off mid-combat and I knock out half my party. That's not ideal. Especially because Larsa still has Reflect up. It's just a really careful balance of Reflect, Damage, Dispel, Try Not to Die, which Tiamat insists on complicating with his attacks. This entire strategy will be way easier once I have an Opal Ring to allow me to heal my own party, but for now it's a very particular strat. Which works, but slowly, and ends up a lot closer than I expected. Good thing Larsa knows balance, and that means it's time for another boss fight. So many boss fights, and this is one of my least favorites, the Elder Worm. Good news is I have Asuna, bad news is, well, basically everything else. This boss has a lot of health, it can deal pretty scary damage, and it can inflict a huge bevy of status effects. Actually, you know what? No, this boss is optional. I'm not doing it. This boss can be pretty rough on a good run, and the MP limitation means the time I need to spend casting Asuna and Raise would be unsustainable. Instead, we're going with Plan B, and Plan B is rent a Chocobo and run through the Gulmore jungle, because Lente's Tear also unlocks the southern area, and I can run through a small section of the Feywood to access Paramina Rift that way. Because, bluntly, that's gonna make me a lot less angry. And then it's over to Mount Baramises to chat with the Grand Kiltias. That means Larsa has left the party, which is sad. On the other hand, Curaga, Darkra, improvements to my weapon and armor selection. Yes, please, and thank you. And that means I can now head south, back through the Paramina Rift to the Still Shrine of Miriam. As usual, the dungeon itself is mostly pretty easy, but the MP issues remain. There are definitely a few points in the game where I just kind of have to run past enemies to preserve MP. Ooh, Ruby Ring. Normally this would not be the most useful item, but given the strength of reflected spells, this may actually be kind of useful. And I have reached one of the best money grinding spots in the game. I do need to be careful though, because some of these enemies can cast Reflect, which is real bad if I don't catch it in time. Hold please, because it is, once more, money grinding time. Grinding complete, loot obtained, I can now run around turning some statues and it's into the next boss fight, the Nuskar. No one in my party has metal equipment, which is the only slightly interesting thing about this fight, so it dies. Beating that gets me a Sage Ring. Half MP cost on the equipped character is so nice. Final statue turned and it's time for the true boss of this dungeon, Marius. And like Vossler, this fight is going to be a problem, because Marius has Reflect and loves to cast it on himself. Now, my normal strategy would be to use the Reflect strats, except Marius starts surrounded by Azer. So, first strategy is to carefully remove the Azer from the picture while dispelling Reflect on Marius. This does not go even slightly okay. All in all, it is a complete mess. But, thanks to having a backup White Mage, it does get done. Then it's into the real pace of the fight where I set up Reflect on the entire party and hope Marius doesn't kill me while I still can't heal. And it goes really well, because the combination of Marius being weak to Thunder and having a Storm Staff for added damage means Marius dies in 3 casts, which is frankly absurd. Reflect casting is indeed the way to win these fights. Absolutely wild. With Marius defeated, it's back to Baramises to sell all the loot I got and buy some new weapons and armor. Nothing too exciting, but it's definitely an improvement. And of course, the final boss fight of this particular gauntlet, Bergen. Start by destroying his ads, then focus fire Bergen. And the combination of Darkra with my brand new Biospell is effective. Yeah, I guess we can call that effective. The next actual destination is Arcades, but I might as well stop in Rabanastre to get a bunch of free items from Mont Blanc. Then take an airship over to Nalbana, and it's into the Mosforan High Wastes, and then into the Salika Wood. And here we arrive at the Phon Coast. And now that I've arrived at the Phon Coast, it's time to kill some frogs, because I can sell these frog spawn in the camp here to unlock a new bizarre recipe, the Exquisite Ring, which is actually the Opal Ring, which allows my spells to pierce Reflect, which should be very useful on Phon running around to cast Threaten Me Reflect, and even more useful on Penelo in combat to heal my party even when I have Reflect up on everyone. The shop also sells new armor and new spells, which is great. I'm also going to do some quick hunts real quick to unlock the Encalados hunt. As usual, this is the only hunt I care about because it gives me one of the 3 golden amulets. And with 2 amulets in tow, it's time for some trial mode grind to get a bunch of LP. Not like too much LP, a proper LP grind for that will come later, but this will help me afford the new spell and accessory licenses I need. Anyway, that done, I can run through the Phon Coast and into the Sita Uplands, and from there into the Soken Cave Palace. And to everyone's favorite boss, the Onion Jerks. Though I'm actually not super concerned about this fight. They have statuses, but I have Asuna, and while there are a lot of them, that actually works in my favor because, wow, all my magic targets multiple enemies. And yeah, that was very easy. Am I going to be able to beat this crystal bug? They can be a bit annoying for mages. I had to skip the one in the Still Shrine. Okay, cool, easy enough. And now deeper into the Soaken Cave Palace because we are not done yet. There is still one more boss to go, Ahriman. And my magic starts out dealing so much damage. It does get a bit spicier when Doom comes into play and the Ahriman splits, and Phon is just burning through his MP. So, apologies in advance, I'm going to have to run around real fast to get MP while my team gets their act together and finishes this fight. Oh, cool, that actually went okay. That is the last boss on the way to Arcades, which is always great. I do have to do a nonsense side quest to access the city proper, but it's fast enough, and that means it's time for shopping. Normally Arcades is really exciting because I can finally buy X potions. I guess I'll just have to settle for new magic and new armor. Okay, new stuff acquired, and it's time to head through the Draclure Laboratory. This area is really easy, actually. There are a lot of enemies, but they only show up in groups, and that's not wise of them. There's also nothing here that is useful because I literally can't use any of it. So it is boss time, Dr. Sid. And the fight starts off not great because I didn't realize this boss could cast Reflect. So let's just start over. Phon gets the Opal Ring to ignore Reflect. Ash can prioritize buffing magic, I guess. These aren't normally that useful, but the alternative is her standing around doing literally nothing, so yeah. Anyway, the nodes are down and we begin another super fun game of run around the arena to restore MP. This fight isn't actually difficult, Penelo has more than enough MP to keep the party healed, but it is pretty tedious. And eventually, Sid goes down. Over in Valfenheim, I can buy some really good spells, actually. What is this, my birthday? Heck yeah. There is new armor, but I can't really afford it yet. That's okay, I'll have all the money I need soon. So, warp back to a route, then run into the Feywood, again, I guess, and we reach the next boss fight against Reflesia. Good news is this boss is weak to Arrow, and a Reflect-centered strategy can be very effective. Bad news is the arena drains MP quite quickly, which could be a problem. Also, the tooltip says the area drains MP slowly. Slowly is not how I'd describe this. Anyway, yeah, even reflected I cannot deal enough damage to win this fight. This is a fight I was worried about. MP has been an issue, and this just amplifies it. Let's hop into trial mode for some LP while I try to think of a solution to this nonsense. Actually, let's just do some money grinding against Mirror Knights as well. I was gonna do this anyway, because I need a lot of money, and the levels I get from it should be pretty useful as well in solving my problem. I really wish red mages learned Arrow in this game. Oh, and before I forget, I should take an airship ride to buy 99 teleport stones. Infinite teleports are always nice. And I can then go to Valfenheim to buy the best armor I can purchase, and that's kind of it for changes. Okay, back to the Feywood. Did I dispel Reflesia's buffs last time? Let's find out. Doesn't look like it. That would explain the damage disparity. Is that enough to win? Yes, somehow. Wow, that was really close. Can't believe that last arrow was enough to win the fight. Okay, that was a fight I was genuinely concerned about, now resolved. Huzzah! I can now head further south, grab the last golden amulet, and into the puzzle section. This area can be dangerous, with pretty strong enemies. On the other hand, these behemoths are weak to ice damage, and Blizzaga exists, and the damage cap doesn't. Also, Reflectka is here. Convenient. Anyway, I have reached Giruvegan. Oh, and it's about time I give my character second license boards, a luxury I am rarely afforded. Phon gets Monk because it means Kiraja access and a ton of HP lowers. Ash gets Time Mage to access the remaining time magic she should have, and Heavy Armor for defense, and Penelo also gets Monk. What can I say, those HP lores are juicy. Ash is going to have to settle for the bubble belt I picked up in the Feywood, at least when she doesn't have a more important accessory to equip. Oh, and before I hop into Giruvegan proper, I really should head out into the Cerobi Steppe to grab Cleanse. This allows me to cure disease, which is basically mandatory in the next few areas. Oh, and I might as well grab Float from the Ceta Uplands. Wow, I won't use modes for Ashmal? Hot dang! I mean, I can't use modes for Ashmal, but that is what I'm more used to. Anyway, back to Giruvegan, and the first boss on the list is Daedalus. This boss is usually quite weak in the first chunk of the fight, and that remains true here. Float also negates all of its earth attacks, which is nice. Daedalus does try to make an impact in the second half, but those Monk HP boosts and Penelo's healing mean it doesn't actually make a difference, and the boss drops. Nice. Giruvegan is actually not too bad. My spells are dealing huge damage to multiple targets, and the weird scaling of MP restoring licenses is finally working in my favor, so that I can really just use offensive spells without worrying about MP. And what a delightful change that is. I even kill an Entite, just because it annoys me. Leading up to the next boss, it's time to properly deploy my Reflect shenanigans. Sage Ring on Phon to reduce MP costs, Opal Ring on Penelo to allow her to heal the party, and Reflectka to apply Reflect quickly. And yep, turns out effectively triple casting Blizzaga is quite strong, in fact. It would be nice if Ash could also cast Blizzaga, but getting Blizzaga on red mages requires beating Cuchulainn, and it probably just isn't worth the time. Especially when bosses still die this fast. With Tyrant dead, I can access the Great Crystal, which is nice. At least there are some nice treasures here. Anyway, moving swiftly on, because wow, this playthrough has taken a while, it is next boss time against the Esper, Shemhazai. And yeah, my strategies are basically the same. Reflect on everyone to reflect spells at the boss, while Penelo heals through Reflect thanks to the Opal Ring. Oh, okay, so that silence is actually going to cause some issues, isn't it? Let's just restart this fight, shall we? Because yeah, this is not going to work. Let's give Penelo the Rose Corsage to make her immune to silence, and then head back into the fight. Triple Reflect stats are very strong, but that doesn't mean that much when I can't cast any spells. Silence avoided. Now it's time to triple Reflect strats. This fight is actually unusually slow. Shemhazai has some pretty dangerous magics and is pretty bulky, even against 3 bio hits right in a row. That being said, silence aside, this fight is not that dangerous. Kira is very strong and my entire party has a lot of HP to survive the shocks and flares Shemhazai sends my way. So this really just becomes a question of how long this is going to take, rather than if I win. And the answer is, eventually. Back in Balfenheim, I can buy another batch of really nice spells and recruit Redis to the party. He only has 2 spells, but at least both spells are really strong. Surely that will get me through the next area without too many issues. Right? Right? Foreshadowing done, it's time for a side quest. That leads me first to the Salika Wood. The Bomb King here is first on my hit list. It never even gets to cast Renew with the spells being thrown at it, which is very nice. This unlocks the later section of the Salika Wood, which leads into the Nabrius Deadlands. And we will be skipping the Crystal Bug, because apparently I'm not strong enough to kill it, which is inconvenient. Anyway, normally I come here to grab the Hermes Sandals, maybe Bravery, but this time my only real target is a second Opal Ring. This means 2 characters can cast the Reflect, which should help a lot. The chest that drops the Opal Ring has a 25% chance of appearing, by the way. It takes no fewer than 10 tries for it to show up, and we are done here. There is nothing that useful left. And that means it's time to head to the Ridorana Cataract for the final dungeon of the game, which basically amounts to a big ol' boss rush. And first on that list is Hydro. Hydro is big, scary, and can inflict a bunch of pretty dangerous status effects. Confuse, Disease, Sap. It also doesn't help that it has the dread ability to strip a target of all of their MP. So needless to say, my first attempt at this fight does not go well, so it's time to switch up strategies. Opal Ring to both Penelo and Ash for support, while Phon gets to cast a bio on the entire party, reflecting it back at Hydro. 4 bios don't deal as much damage as I'd like, but it's still quite good. I've made the mistake of leaving my entire party right next to each other, so no one has any MP. This should be the end of the fight, but by running around, switching characters, I managed to build up just enough MP to get people back up and cast some spells to win the fight. So glad Redis has a rise. Gather some black orbs, free some seals, Hermes Sandals. Is there any world where I can actually equip this on anyone? I think no. Anyway, next boss is Pandemonium, but let me just do some running to get my MP back before I head into the fight. This boss, as ever, is more annoying than threatening. Getting it down to half HP is very quick, very easy, and then he uses perfect defense to negate all attacks. So I just sort of hang out while Penelo heals with Kira. As soon as the palings fall, I can end the boss very quickly. Oh, I'm stupid. There is something I should do before proceeding. Head to the South Bank Village to deal with some Cactuar nonsense, then complete as much of the Patient in the Desert quest as I can. I already sold some of the required items, but I really just need to complete this to get the Barheim key. Back in Barheim, I can run all the way back to our boy Burrow to buy Scourge. This is just bio, but better, and I really should have grabbed this much earlier, but oh well. And then it's back into the Nabrius Deadlands to correct another oversight on my part, because in the Necro Hall of Nabudis, there is actually an item I want, specifically the Faith spell to boost the efficacy of my offensive casts. Yes, these would have been great to grab before entering the Pharos, but now is going to have to be good enough. Okay, I have finally grabbed all the silly items I skipped earlier. It's time to head back to the Pharos. Oh, these brain pans have Reflect? Well, that's gonna make Redis way less useful than normal. At least I have 2 Opal Rings for Phon and Ash. Scourge may be dealing a lot of damage, but wow, is it MP intensive. It's actually been a decent chunk of time since MP was a problem in exploration. So glad to have this fun back. No, don't worry, I'm going to skip how long all this nonsense took and just focus on the bosses. Just know, this took 3 times as long as it should have because of MP issues. Anyway, moving swiftly onwards to the next boss in the list, Slight. Slight is a physically attacking powerhouse, especially at low health, and while Monk does mean my party has a lot of HP, they don't have a lot of defense, which means I need to kill Slight very quickly. Good news is that Slight is weak to fire, which means I can kill the boss in 2 reflected Firagas. So that's very nice. But there's still more Pharos to go. On the next level, I give up items, because who cares, the only thing I can't give up is magic use. Nothing else is actually useful to me. And here I can grab a 3rd opal ring, almost certainly worthless, but good to pick up just in case. I can also run past a lot of fights as I progress, which is very nice, because that means I won't run into too much of an MP issue anymore. Hooray! Next boss up is Fenrir, and yeah, this fight also shouldn't be too bad. This boss likes to buff itself, but who cares, I have Dispel, and while it doesn't have any elemental weaknesses I can exploit, it can be put to sleep. And I have Sleepga, which I can reflect to make sure that happens. So then it's just spam reflected Scourges until it dies, which does not take very long. On the way to the next boss, I grab White Robes and Ardor. Ardor is a very strong fire spell, and I am thrilled to add it to my repertoire. We're cruising along now, and it's time for the next boss, Ashmal. Usual strategy is in place, and thanks to Float, I don't even need to worry about any of his earth attacks. And Ashmal is weak to wind, which is great. I really wish Red Mages got Aroga. Oh well, I really only need one character casting Aroga anyway. Okay, this boss rush is almost done. Next up is Gabranth. Would you believe I'm going to use Reflect strats? Because I'm going to use Reflect strats. And yeah, Scourge and Ardor combined are very, very strong. It is always annoying to have to deal with Gabranth's invincibility phase, though. It's really annoying to just run around doing nothing for a bit. Normally it doesn't matter too much because he's only immune to magic. However, in this run, that is a problem. I mean, problem is overstating it. It's a minor inconvenience. Once that paling falls, this fight is over, and we're into the Dr. Sid fight. As you might expect, it is not difficult to bring Sid down to half health. And while Famfrit is more dangerous, technically, it also has a fire weakness, meaning reflected Firagas are dealing about 12,000 per hit. I do hit a bit of a snag when Phon gets silenced, but that's easily fixed and Famfrit drops. Sid lasts several casts more, but not many. That concludes the Pharos and unlocks the final area, Bahamut. There is more I could do, but nothing I should really need to do. So let's hop on board the Bahamut and face down against Gabranth again. This version of the fight is always scarier because Gabranth goes absolutely crazy at low HP. The good news is that reflected spells means he stays in low HP for a very short amount of time. So it's into the first Vayne fight. I often joke how this fight is more cutscene than fight because of how many cutscene attacks Vayne has, and how much damage I'm dealing. However, I do think that is actually just true here. Out comes Swole Vayne with his many swords. While I could target specific enemies, it probably just makes more sense to target my reflected party and count on the damage to go where it needs to, which works quite well. Much like Gabranth, Swole Vayne has a magic immune phase, which really just gives me a chance to run around restoring MP. And now it's into the Undying fight. I am looking at my MP pools, and I am genuinely a little bit concerned. Damage-wise, I can absolutely win this, but the Undying will be immune to magic for 2 distinct phases of this fight, and that is potentially very concerning. At least Vayne also knows Kiraja to maybe help with that. Oh, that was a poorly timed Mega Flare. Okay, we're back up. Big priorities, in addition to damage, is making sure that any buffs the Undying casts are dispelled. And while less ideal, the magic immune phases of this fight are great for running around to restore MP. Oh, okay, so that went real south, real quick. I think that was a fluke more than anything. Let's just reload the autosave and try again. I think getting through phases is going to be more useful, so both Phon and Ash should be using offensive magic. I can also set some better gambits to make sure my party actually stays at survivable HP. Oh, you know what? I haven't been using defensive buffs. The old target versions of these are out of reach, and single target buffing spells usually aren't that necessary, but I think that extra durability is going to be essential here, even if Undying does have Dispel. Okay, we are in the final paling, so no reflect for me for a minute, while I boost defense and hope that... Nope, that went bad. Oh, right. Monks can also get Raise. Really good news there, because I need to revive Ash and Penelo, and Bosch is dead, and there we go. One last reflected Ardor takes out the last of Vayne's health. And that was Final Fantasy XII, beaten using only magic. And that was kind of a mess, actually. Magic is very strong in this game, maybe even too strong in some ways, but when you have no way to consistently restore MP, actually being able to cast spells long term can quickly become a problem. But I will have more to say about that in the summary video, out in a few weeks. I did want to shout out that I do have a Patreon, linked in the description. I spend a lot of time making these videos, so if you enjoyed the video, want to support the channel, and are financially stable enough to do so, that exists. No pressure though, this channel is free to enjoy for everyone, and will remain that way. For now, if you liked this video, be sure to hit that like button. If you'd like to see more of this, feel free to subscribe. Hey, maybe leave a comment if you have something you'd like to say. But whatever you decide to do, have a safe trip home.